What's going on, Met fans? Welcome back to another episode of Metcast. On tonight's off night, we have John Harper of SNY, along with my co-host Dan Bartels of the New York Post. We are excited, John. We have LA coming in this weekend, but before we get to that, we got to address the elephant in the room. You're right there. You cover the Mets every single day. What is going on with Juan Soto, in your opinion?
That is the $765 million question. It's really, to me, it's just gotten strange. I mean, it got even stranger last night when I saw him take two at bats without swinging the bat, two strikeouts without swinging the bat against Crochet, who's a tough lefty. But come on, I mean, I know. So we know Soto, how plate discipline he is, but those balls are a couple of balls are right down the middle. You heard Keith Hernandez like, what's going on here? So I don't know. We heard all the stories coming out over the weekend. The Yankees, you're hearing a lot of stuff from Yankee people about that, that maybe his heart was with the Yankees, that his family wanted him to sign with the Mets. I don't know. And then, so for the most part, you're never sure about this stuff. And I was interested to hear Adam Ottavino was on MLB Network this week. And when you hear a player talk about it, it becomes a little different. And Ottavino said, and Ottavino, you guys know, he's a smart guy. And he said, for the most part, I dismissed all the stuff you're hearing about Soto's not happy and all that. But the more I watch, he said, even Ottavino said, hey, there's something going on there. So I don't know. I don't think that's affected his offense necessarily. I think he's put pressure on himself. He hasn't looked like the same guy at the plate. He's been anxious. He's been rolling over. His ground ball rate was much higher than it has been in past years. He didn't seem comfortable. But then he seemed to fall into a good groove there for maybe a week or so. And I thought he had turned the corner, but now he's kind of back to where he was. So it's really puzzling because he's just too good a hitter to not really catch fire and just take off at some point.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting? I saw this video. There's a lot of old videos of him are surfacing now over on X, the Washington World Series, where he's doing his shuffle, he's shaking his head at the pitcher, he's fouling off tough pitches, which he was doing earlier in the season for us. And I'll never forget, I go to spring training every single year. We cover the New York Mets from spring training, and I sat front row. He was chirping during spring training. He had the swagger. He's hitting nukes out to left center. His first ever at bat in a New York Mets uniform in spring training. He hits a missile out to left field, and I'm like, I can't believe we got a guy like this. The regular season started, and it all just seemed to vanish. What do you make of that? Is it psychological? I don't buy the Yankee thing. I just simply do not buy it. I find it very hard to believe that he's all into it, and then opening day happens, and all of a sudden he's hurt by it. Could it be a case of he got paid a lot of money, he wasn't as prepared this off season, or there's just so much going on in the off season where it's a mental thing, he could get out of it? Or could we see this happening throughout the whole year, kind of like a Carlos Beltran or a Francisco Lindor situation?
Well, you make a good point, because I saw the same thing at spring training. He seemed pretty relaxed. He seemed comfortable. He was smiling a lot. You saw all that. And that first at bat, a left center home run. And that's really that's when he's going well, is when he's taking the ball that way. And so it looked like everything was in place. And then I just feel like maybe he put a little more pressure on himself than he did with last year when the Yankees, because he did have Judge behind him and all that. He knows now he is making the money. The expectations are through the roof. And it just seemed like he got off to a bad start, where he was out in front a little bit and pulling the ball on the ground more than he had in the past. And I just wondered if that started to build a little bit of frustration or something, because that's the only explanation, other than all the other stuff that you can speculate about all day long if you want, but nobody knows for sure. The on the field stuff, that's what it looked like to me early on. And I talked to scouts who said the same thing. They remember, a couple of them in particular pointed to the ground ball rate and said, that's not Soto. When he stays back, he lets the ball get deep, and he likes to go the other way and hits the ball in the air or on the line. When he's pulling, it usually a sign that he's a little bit anxious, a little bit out in front, but that usually doesn't last for him. This has lasted a long time, so it's really hard to figure.
John, would you keep Soto in the 3-hole, or did you like him more in the 2-hole where he is, or where he was?
Well, it's interesting. I just talking to somebody today who knew him from his Washington days, and they said he did not like hitting in the 3-hole. And in fact, there was a point where that kind of made it an issue with Davey Martinez. So I don't know. I mean, from the way things are going, I think it's worth a try, whether he likes it or not, because kick him into gear. The other night was a bad look for him. Mendoza, he hits the ball off the wall, doesn't run, doesn't get to second base. Mendoza comes out and says, hey, I need to talk to him about that. And then Soto says, what do you mean? I'm hustling all the time. So Mendoza may be at a point where saying, hey, I need to try something to kind of, wake him up a little bit one way or the other. Mendoza's a good guy, and I think one of his strengths is his relationships with players. So I don't think he would ambush him with that or anything. I think he would talk to him about it. But maybe he just said to Soto, hey, look, I want to try something different because we need to get this offense going, not just you, but the offense in general. So we'll see. I don't mind him in the 3 spot. I like Lindor there, and I like Lindor. You got to keep him in the leadoff spot because he's just been so comfortable there. We were talking about this tonight on Baseball Night in New York. They had us make out our lineups right now against right-handers. I would put McNeil in the 2 spot. He's been swinging the bat well, so I'd put him in the 2 spot. I'd put Soto in the 3, Alonso 4, and then go from there. I would, I guess, move. Probably Vientos still in the DH, and then I would actually move Batty up and move Nimmo down. Beatty's swinging a bit. I know maybe who knows if it'll last, but I'd take advantage of it, try and ride him while he's hot. And I do wonder a little bit about Nimmo. I mean, he had a bad second half last year. He hasn't quite looked right this year. I don't know if it's just a plantar fasciitis, the knee, anything like that. But I do think it wouldn't hurt to kind of shake this up a little bit.
Another too. You talked about it moving Pete down. I think it's the longest in his career currently that he's gone without a home run. 0 for 58, roughly, whatever it is now. He did have the hit last night, but are you concerned about Pete at all? He had an amazing start to his year, was outperforming Soto by a mile, but now he's really come back down to earth. Are you worried, or do you expect Pete to pick it up?
I think he'll pick it up. Although of course, he'll tell you that he hit 2 home runs in the last week, one at Yankee Stadium and then one at Fenway that the wind held up both times. But it is a little bit concerning that he's gone back to chasing a little bit more, striking out more than he was early in the year when he was so locked in. I mean, nobody stays locked in the whole year long. So I think he's still in a pretty good place overall. I think he'll bounce back. You couldn't expect him to continue the way he was going, but it is a little concerning because if he kind of gets back to where he was last year, now you're talking about a whole different level of offense because they need him. They need him to be the Pete Alonso of April, more so than May, if it's going to be a championship level offense.
Now, John, I want to move on. We'll move on from Juan Soto for right now, but I'm sure we'll circle back around to it. But I've been screaming for it all off season. I gave 2. Everybody names, their breakout players for the year. I named my 2 guys preseason before spring training even started. I said, hey, Oscar Brazaban is not nearly as bad as he was for us in the second half. I think kind of that adjustment period, he just couldn't make it coming over from Miami where let's face it, it's a minor league stadium, at least minor league attendance, no pressure. Then you come into a middle of a pennant race over in the National League East. I just think that he needed that adjustment period. So he was my number 1 guy. We see that 0.9 ERA right now. Probably the most reliable guy out of the pen.
That's a good call.
Well, thank you. I like to. No, I'm just kidding. And number 2, I said, and I wasn't saying he's going to be a star, but I said I think this is the year Brett Baty actually puts it together. And now it's been up and down since the beginning, but my feeling is this: he is clearly. And it's not even close, in my opinion. Maybe you feel different. You can let us know. He is clearly the better defensive third baseman, and it's actually a night and day. Vientos can't make a lot of the routine plays where Baty's stopping line drives. He's diving to his left, diving to his right, throwing over the top. He looks very confident over there. It's a night and day situation with Vientos, and now he's starting to hit. I want to see him get every day at bats. He hits a home. John, think about this. He hits a home run in 3 out of 4 games, and they're sitting him. Yeah. It doesn't make sense. I get it's the analytics, but Mendoza's always talked about, a lot of it's analytics, but sometimes you need to manage with your gut. And my gut is telling me this kid needs to get an actual run. What he did against Crochet, one of the hardest lefties to hit in the national, in MLB, that shows me right there. He's got a hard eye at the plate right now. Let him play every day and stop tinkering back and forth with him, playing one day, not playing another day. He was a former first-round pick, arguably had the greatest hit tool coming out of that draft class, and only dropped because he was a year older than most of the prospects in there. Hopefully he's living up to those expectations. But what do you think about him playing every single day going forward?
Yeah, I'm with you right now. I think you got to do that. And I heard from scouts for years how good a hitter he was in the minor leagues. They were all sure he was going to hit in the big leagues. I think a lot of it's been confidence. He's been up and down, but he does look like a different guy right now. And I think obviously, I mean, certainly a step in that direction. Seems like by starting him against Crochet. I know Mendoza said it had something mostly to do with his defense, but still, that was a great at bat. He hangs it. He basically, Crochet tries to bust him inside twice. Second time, he gets the barrel through and gets it up the middle. And, especially when you saw what Crochet was doing to Soto. So Scout today made that point that, this kid Batty hangs in there against lefties when he's going well. And I think you're right. You're seeing a different guy. I mean, defensively, he's taken a huge step forward. I mean, he's bouncing around. He's making plays I haven't seen. Even when he played pretty well last year, he's reached the level, and I feel like it's mostly confidence. He's just playing free and easy. He's more athletic maybe than we even thought coming up. And I think that confidence defensively is carrying over now because I think it's mostly making good swing decisions, pitch recognition, which he was having a problem with, up and down the last couple of years. It just seems like he's in a good spot in terms of his confidence, and so much of that, I mean, you guys know, so much of hitting has to do with confidence. And I think we're seeing that. So I would play him right now and let's see if you can ride this out. Yeah, I mean, look, Vientos he's worked hard to make himself adequate at third, but he's hurt them this year at times at third base with his defense. So I think you got to try and play Batty there. And just to circle back quickly, Brazoban's been amazing, man. I mean, he was the guy who wouldn't throw enough strikes last year. I saw a stat today. He's one of the top 5 pitchers in baseball in terms of his increase in first pitch strike percentage compared to last year. So he's made huge strides that way. He's got the stuff to do it. He's got the great changeup. He's got the hard sinker, and now he seems confident in terms of that. I actually thought last night I thought McGill was pitching well enough. I would have left him in for that bases loaded at bat against Bregman. Because it was a kind of a fluky 5th inning. A couple of guys reached the way they reached base that inning, but Mendoza trusts Brazoban, so he went to him, got the big strikeout. This guy, he's become kind of the stopper out there in terms of number 2 in importance, maybe behind Diaz in that bullpen.
Well, we had this quote yesterday from Brazoban. Quote, "I'm the older pitcher and I've used it in the past as I've been here. The analytics teams and coaches have helped me gather more information and more data on how my pitches work. And that's what's transformed him as a pitcher, supposedly this season." That was in his post game yesterday. But I want to circle back to one name that you brought up, Mark Vientos. Let's be honest, John. The last I checked, I believe he was -9 runs saved. He's been a minus defender this year. He's not getting to balls to his left or right. And I'm wondering if that's affecting his offense as we see his OPS is in the 600s. And the Mets, let's be honest, they have 3 or 4 guys that have high 600 OPSs. The last I checked, Nimmo was there, Vientos was there, Alvarez was there in the low 600s. I'm not sure what happened with him over the last couple of years. The guy had 25 home runs in his first 430 at-bats, 335 at-bats since. He's got 12 home runs, so almost 80 at-bats less. He's got half the amount of home runs. But what's interesting, and not a lot of people know, he's actually on pace to have almost identical or more RBIs in that span. I don't know what you make of that. For me personally, I look at a guy like Alvarez. He almost, I don't want to say looks out of shape, but he definitely looks a lot bigger than when he first came up. He just, his swing looks different. His confidence looks different. But I want to keep an eye on the Mark Vientos conversation that we were just talking about. Where do you see his fit long term? We've heard nonstop, well, He's too young to make a DH. I don't buy that whatsoever. Kyle Schwarber's been DHing for what seems forever. He could maybe be that and maybe take a little bit of that pressure off. Maybe he could start performing offensively, because I just don't think defensively he's going to be a good defender ever. He's 25 years old. It's kind of, for me, when you're that age, you either are or you aren't. You're at your most agile that you'll ever be. And for him, he makes too many mistakes. And John, the mistakes he makes are always in the critical aspects of the game. It's already cost us 2 games this year, and it killed us in the playoffs last year. So for me, that experiment needs to end, and it needs to be over. And if it's not Batty, maybe you give Acuña a shot over there, or maybe we move on to one other player that I know Dan's going to be bringing up next.
Yeah, I have a feeling I know who that is.
Yeah.
I Vientos, I tell you, you never know 1 year, it's kind of a hot rookie year, if that's going to be sustainable. But I kind of sold on him when I saw what he did in the postseason. He had a great postseason against some really good pitching. So I thought he was going to come and just kind of reestablish himself again this year, but hasn't been the same guy. I actually made a case today when we were talking about lineups again against lefties right now. I might throw him in that 2 spot, put him ahead of Soto, and he might maybe get more fastballs and maybe get him going, because I still think there's a lot of life in that bat. But you're right. I can't play him at third base other than occasionally, maybe just if he wants it, maybe he needs it just to keep himself in the best shape possible in terms of his mental attitude and all that. But he can't play a lot of third base. He just doesn't. It's not. I don't think he's worked at it. He's gotten better, but he's a slow-footed guy. We know he doesn't run well, and he doesn't have great footwork around the position. And you saw it. It became so evident, especially when they moved Acuña over there for a couple of games at third base. He's so lightning quick there. He coming in on balls, slow rollers. Vientos is not good on those slow rollers, and it's cost him a couple of times. So they need to figure that out. You got to play Batty there now, and then eventually there might be somebody else coming. I guess you guys are going to talk about.
Well, yeah, it is a perfect segue, John, because Ronnie Mauricio, he is the person that I think a lot of us look at, and I want to get your thoughts on it. He puts a lot of pressure on Batty, even. It puts a lot of pressure on Vientos, obviously, but you look at a switch hitting dynamic, can steal you 30 bags, can hit you 30 home runs. He's still very much unproven, of course, but when he was up in the big leagues in 23, it looked like every ball he hit was 115. So how do you see that? You can't, can you keep all 3 in Batty, Vientos, and Mauricio? And how do you see that shaping up?
Plus Acuña, right? I know it's getting crowded. Right. It could get crowded in there. I know I've heard they want to be careful and not rush Mauricio back. He's coming back from the ACL, and apparently he had some setbacks along the way, so that's what slowed him down. But you're right. I mean, the guy hits the ball hard. But I need to see a little bit more. I haven't seen a lot of him third base or even second base to know if he can handle position. I heard in the minors he had some problems at times, especially at second base. Third seems like maybe his best position in terms of just being able to react and play it. But you got to see it at the big league level to know for sure. But he's an interesting guy just because he does hit the ball so hard. He runs, he had the speed. I assume the speed's still there. But I don't think they're going to rush it. I think they feel like they can take some time here. Now give Batty a run and see how that goes. Acuña is an interesting part of this. He started out pretty hot, but doesn't have a lot of power. He has speed, but there's so many different parts now. They got to figure out which way works best.
And we talk about different positions that are up in the air moving forward. I think catcher right now is on the table, at least for a conversation, because Torrens last night, level swing, he's great, and he doesn't try to hit the home run, and right now he's hitting. And Alvarez, kind of pedestrian, many of his at-bats. Do you give Torrens the starts moving forward, and what is that situation looking like at catcher?
That's tricky, man. I would at least, I think, at this point, give him equal time with Alvarez. I mean, I would love to know what they're seeing and what they think internally, internally with Alvarez. But you're right. You talked about it before. I mean, there was so much hype for him, and it just, he hit the 25 home runs his rookie year. But since then, he hasn't. And even the first year, he had a bad second half. He hasn't looked like a guy that is a solid all-around hitter. He still chases a lot, and the power really hasn't been there. I know coming back from that, the broken hamate bone could be an issue in terms of the power, but I mean, you're trying to win right now, and Terens might be your best bet. He, as you said, puts the ball on the bat, has some pretty good at bats, and his defense behind the plate, his catch and throw. I mean, he's probably maybe the best in the game. I think he's thrown out about 50% of runners this year. So it's a good problem to have, as they always say. But I don't know how Alvarez would handle it if he wasn't really kind of the number one guy. But at some point, you can't worry about that. Terens is a really good option for them.
Now I want to bring up someone who you just brought up. I plan on talking about him, and it is Luis Angel Acuña. Let's be honest, John, and I'm one of those sticklers. I mean, I'm sure you saw earlier, Ernest Dove got the shout out by Steve Cohen. Very rightfully so. Ernest is one of the most down-to-earth people that I know, has become a friend of mine, but he is an absolute guru when it comes to Mets and their prospects. And a lot of the scouts that I've spoken to in the past, maybe not this year, but last year, some of his former Mets scouts that I spoke to told me that they weren't a big believer in Acuña's offensive stick. He couldn't hit in the minor leagues. Let's be honest. He comes up. He has that big flash in the pan. I don't like to say flash in the pan, but, that run with us towards the end of the year. I think the league might be catching up to him now. Over the month of May, he's got 43 at-bats. His OPS is a measly 547, which would put him in the bottom 5% of all MLB. And when you're looking at all his stats, yes, he could still steal a bag, but he's got 1 double in the entire month, 0 triples, 0 home runs, 3 RBIs. He's got the 3 walks. And when you look at the stolen bases, he's got 3, but that average is dipped all the way to 233 in the month of May. Where do you see his future? Because if I'm being honest with you, I think he gets the rest of this month, the next week and a half. And if he continues to have an OPS in the 530s, how much longer can the Mets wait? He's probably on the block to potentially get moved down. If Mauricio stays red hot, then you're talking potentially a 3-week swing with Mauricio being hot. He's hitting home runs all over the place. What is he? 7 for 11 since coming back. He has a stolen base, couple home runs. He's slashing the ball. He's hitting the ball still 110 plus miles an hour off the bat consistently. That seems to be like maybe the switch for me. What do you think?
It could be. I mean, give him a little more time, give both guys a little more time. Acuña, fans fell in love with him, and rightly so, the way he played. He came up last year and even to start this year. But you're right, Major League pitching, they find the holes eventually if they're there. And, that's what you heard last year, that Acuña wasn't really very impressive in AAA on a day-to-day basis in terms of his offense. But then some guys are able to pick it up at the highest level, play, their best when the bright lights and all that stuff. We've seen with guys like that before, but now maybe it's catching up with him. And, still, McNeil is still a solid second baseman. And right now he's one of their better hitters. So there's not a lot of room for Acuña, especially if Batty's going to play third. So I got to see his speed is nice to have. He's actually helped them win a couple of games with his speed, but you got at some point, that the offense has to play as well, especially if Mauricio does continue to progress. They got it's a crowded spot there. But I mean, they have the versatility of being able to move McNeil to the outfield, but still, at some point, I don't know. I mean, Acuña, has he leveled off here, or is he going to have another bump? He's not going to be able to stay at this level for long. But you're right, it's going to be. Especially at some point, Winker's going to come back too, and that's going to create a little bit more of an issue in terms of the DH, Vientos, and all that stuff. So they got a lot of decisions to make pretty soon.
And that was honestly my last question, John, too, before we go to the audience. Last night, we saw Marte in left field, and I get they want to have him play the veteran experience, and you want some production out of him when you can get it, but I think that's the problem. You're not getting the production out of Marte right now. So what is the future plan with a guy like that? I value having him in the playoffs, but you got to get to the playoffs. And I don't know, with Marte, Azokar, there's a couple guys on this roster. Like you said, when Winker comes back, like who would be your first thought or player that comes to mind that says, oh, maybe he's on the hot seat, proverbial, if you will? Yeah.
Well, I mean, you would think Azokar is the most vulnerable, but at some point, Marte, he's got to give them more than he's given them. He's had a few decent games, but I don't think he's not going to help you in the outfield at this point. So I don't think there's going to be a lot of play out there. So he's mostly a DH, and mostly a DH against left-handed pitching. So, at some point, maybe I know he's still making a lot of money, but I don't think that's going to be the deciding factor, especially as you get a little bit deeper into the season. If he's not having a big impact, he could be a guy that goes, especially if they like what they're seeing from the young guys. If they got enough faith in the young guys, then maybe he does have to kind of bite the bullet.
Drew Gilbert.
Because Winker's certainly going to be part of it as a left-handed bat.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, well, that's one of the first questions we'll have from the fans. Don't jump the gun, Dan. But I will say this, John. And it's interesting you bring up Marte, because I've made this point, and I don't want to say I've gotten killed by Mets fans. The reasonable Mets fans understand. Some of us, and I'm just as guilty as it, love some of those blue and orange goggles on a Friday night.
Is there such a thing as a reasonable Mets fan? I didn't know that.
No, you would have no clue. But I will say this, and correct me if I'm wrong. Jesse Winker, best position, DH. Mark Vientos, best position, DH. Starling Marte, best position, DH. It's not going to work long term. And that's one thing that David Stearns is going to have to make a decision on, because it's interesting. And this is what sometimes the lineup configurations baffle my mind. So I wonder who's really calling the shots. Obviously, I think it's David Stearns. In the long run, is calling the shots. If he wants a certain lineup, it's going to happen. But we hear with these ground ball pitchers like David Peterson, Clay Holmes. Why on earth is Mark Vientos playing third base if you have ground ball pitchers on the mound and he's not a suitable third baseman? And all we ever heard was David Stearns, the Tyrone Taylors. Let's be honest, John. He's not a starting player long term. Very good fourth outfielder, good in short-term stints. Right. But last year, he got exposed long-term at the plate. This year, he's getting a little exposed long-term at the plate. And that's what's going to bring me to our first question from Buzz over on YouTube. Buzz, thanks for chiming in. One of our long-term contributors, is Drew Gilbert being considered anytime soon? And I saw that comment. I seen what he's doing. 24-game on-base streak down in the minors, John. I know that necessarily the batting average might not be there, but he's a plus defender. He's got a plus arm, and maybe, just maybe, a little bit of that youth juice brought into this clubhouse. Could that ignite some of these bats? Your opinion?
Well, it could, and that's the spot. Center field is the spot. It'd be nice if Pete Crow Armstrong was out there, but that's ship is sailed, as we know. It's too bad Gilbert missed so much time last year. He might be here right now. He had all the injury problems last year with the hamstring. And I've heard good things about him. And you're right. I mean, I like Taylor just because he's a great outfielder. He makes a lot of really good plays, and I think he gives him some value out there for sure. And it's funny, I see him get big hits from time to time, and I keep thinking, wow, he's having, but then every time I look up at the numbers, I guess he's not really having a good year, So Gilbert's got to be on their radar, but I would think probably not, for maybe a couple more months into the second half. I would think they want to give him more time down there. I don't know.
Is he one of the first guys to get called up if, like, say in a Zokar or I don't want to think about it, but we got to talk about realistic possibilities here. If a guy like Tyrone Taylor did go down, are the New York Mets prepared to start Jeff McNeil in center field day in and day out? Because let's be honest, Marte ain't starting out there. They're definitely not moving Nimmo back there because he's still not running at 100% with that plantar fasciitis. And Juan Soto, you stay in right field right where you belong, buddy.
Well, yeah. I mean, in that case, then maybe you do reach down and see if Gilbert, in those kind of situations, teams have always reached down and see if maybe bring a guy up, even whether he's ready or not, just to get a look and see if he can. Because, listen, I love McNeil, and the guy's a great versatile. He's got great instincts at any position he plays, but he can't play center field on a daily basis. You saw one night he was out there and couldn't get the balls in the gap. He doesn't have that kind of range out there. He's a sure-handed guy. I think he can play there from time to time if you want that extra bat in the lineup, and he won't kill you necessarily, but he can't be there on an everyday basis. So if there was another injury and you're not getting Siri back anytime soon, then, maybe you do reach down and go and bring Drew Gilbert up and see what he looks like at the big league level. You never know. I mean, nobody thought Acuña was really ready last year, and he came up and played well. So that's a possibility for sure. The guy, he's on their radar. I know that.
My personal opinion, as we get to Andre's question, I personally do think Gilbert's ready. John, he's going to be 25 by the end of this season.
Yeah, that's
he's
fair.
Not a spring chicken.
He hasn't had a lot of time in AAA because he missed so much time last year.
True. But when I see a guy have 24, a 24 on base streak, like I know my partner here, Dan, not to expose Dan at all, but he's not the biggest fan of Jet Williams. He is my by far favorite position prospect out there. I think he's got a crazy elite eye at the plate. Yeah. And we're starting to see him put it together down in Double-A. His average is up. His on base is over 400. He's got a few home runs. He's stealing bases. He looks very good out there. But Andre, and that's what gets me to this question here. Andre checking in. My question for John, do you think this is the year Stearns packages some of these prospects / younger players for either an impact hitter or elite starter?
I think it's time. I really do, because as we've just been talking about, you got a lot of guys who play similar positions. So you got a lot of middle infield types, guys who maybe can play center field. Maybe Acuña, maybe he can go out and play center field, but I haven't seen it. I know I've heard he looked okay out there when they tried it, but I haven't seen it. And then Jet Williams is another guy. Maybe he could play some center field. So you have a lot of similar types, but that's what good organizations do. You're seeing it right now. The Orioles did not do that. They got all these prospects, all these good young players, and they have yet to make a real strong move to add to their pitching. And now it's come back to haunt them. Good organizations, good GMs identify, or at least as best they can, make their best educated guess on who's going to be the guy they want to keep and who they can afford to trade away. And before those guys, because they're not all going to make it, we know that. So before a couple of them do get exposed, you make the trade and you get as much value as you can for that. So I do think, from what I've heard, this is the year, because that draft, that farm system has been built up to the point where they have enough depth there. They can go out and make a big trade like that at the deadline. I thought it would be for a pitcher, but who knows? The way, if some of these guys don't pick it up offensively, maybe it will be for a bat.
Yeah, and who knows, John? What I will say this before we get to our next question, and Dan, if you have anything, feel free to jump in. Something I'm very excited about is what David Stearns did in Milwaukee, finding guys left and right. If you're a Mets fan right now, go look up Carson Bange. Yeah. He is tearing the cover off the ball. A first-round pick last year who was a two-way player, and Stearns saw him and said, you're going to be an elite bat. And he's probably not too far away. He came out of college, just like the Brandon Sproats. And that leads me to a guy that I want to bring up before we get to our next question from our audience. John, we're all falling in love. The butterflies are in the air. Nolan McLean.
Yeah.
He's throwing. He reminds me of a kid when I used to go to the playground and I played against the big kids and they threw a 12-foot breaking ball that you had no shot of hitting. The scouts say it's a 70+ breaking ball. You saw the highlight today. Another outing, only gave up one earned run. He's throwing the wiffle ball. Oh, and by the way, he's throwing 95, 96. Yeah, give us your perspective on him. And is there a chance we could see him by the end of the season?
Yeah, I saw a video of him maybe a month or so ago and I hadn't seen a lot of him. When I saw that slider, I was like, whoa. And I think I tweeted about it. It reminded me of Jose Fernandez, the late Jose Fernandez of the Miami Marlins. Yep. He was the guy who was throwing a sweeper before anybody heard of the sweeper. I mean, that thing just went like a wiffle ball, as you said. McLean looks like that kind of guy. And now that he's focused solely on pitching, it seems maybe he's made some leaps forward since then. To me, he's the kind of guy with that kind of specialty pitch that could really play more so out of the bullpen maybe than as a starter. And I think it was Joe DeMayo who I saw I quoted him on this on Twitter. He made a note that Stearns, in Milwaukee with young pitchers, he broke in some young pitchers as relievers, guys like Corbin Burns, Woodruff, and Peralta. He broke them in as relievers in their young years. So maybe that's what he would do with a guy like a McLean or maybe some of these other guys down there, is to use them in the pen, because I don't know if they necessarily throw them in the rotation the Mets should have enough in rotation. I think if they make a move, I still think starting pitcher is where they would go. But you can never have enough of those dominant guys in the bullpen. And I still think, they're missing Minter big time out there. So I think if you can add to that pen in a big way, McLean looks like the kind of guy that could be an instant contributor out there.
Real quick too, John, like you mentioned Brandon Sproat, and we're talking about prospect pitchers. He's the #1 overall prospect, and he has a high 6 ERA. He's pitched 9 games this year. He's very up and down. Are you concerned about Brandon Sproat? And is there a chance we see him this year? I mean, every indication has been told that we are, but the fastball's still flat. I think it's lost a little bit of velocity too. So are you any red flags going up with Brandon Sproat?
Yeah, but it's just because, when he came, he zoomed through the system last year, but then he stalled at AAA, which happens to a lot of guys their first time around in AAA because you got more veteran bats. You need better command. You can't just throw the ball by guys. And then so, you heard Stearns in spring training this year when he was asked about Sproat saying we need to see him succeed at AAA before we can even think about bringing him up. And so far he hasn't. Talking to scouts, he said some of the same issues. He's kind of shying away from contact, hasn't really commanded his off-speed stuff. So, he can't throw his fastball by guys because they're sitting a lot on fastball. Even with maturity at that and experience at that level, because of his raw talent, what we saw last year, he'll get over that. But it's, I don't think Stearns is going to be quick to bring him up unless they have all kinds of injuries or something like that, because I think Stearns wants guys to prove it at every level before he's gonna bring a guy up.
John, how about another prospect? I keep wanting to get to these comments, but I'm loving this conversation. Another prospect that seemingly came out of nowhere, and he enters MLB.com's top 50 prospects. Jonah Tong.
Yeah.
I mean, where did this kid come from? Another guy who's slight of stature, throwing 92 last year, 93. I was asking Ernest Dove about this. I said, he's throwing 92, 93. He's like, all of a sudden he picks up 3, 4, 5 miles an hour on his fastball, dominating at the lower levels. He and Jet Williams both were propelled into MLB's top 50 prospects. Now the New York Mets are looking at potentially 3 top 100 pitchers, where, let's be honest, John, the last time we had that, the Matt Harvey days, you're talking a long time ago, a decade ago. And the New York Mets have Nolan McLean, Brandon Sproat, and Jonah Tong all going to be in the top 100, and one of them being in the top 50. What is your take on Jonah Tong?
He's an interesting guy. I haven't seen him in person, but I saw him. I've seen enough of video. He reminds me of Tim Lincecum. He's not a big guy, comes kind of straight over the top, kind of funky in a way with his delivery. And he obviously has some deception when you see the swings that he gets against not only his fastball, but his breaking stuff as well. So you need to see him succeed at the highest levels in the minors as well. But he looks like an interesting guy. And you're right. I mean, they had a hard time developing pitching for a lot of years. I did a story last year. They made some changes in the organization. They start about 5 years ago, and they started drafting college pitchers instead of high school pitchers. And it seemed to have made a difference. You see some of these guys succeed right away. Even last year with the kid Scott out of Florida before he hurt his arm, he was kind of a success story. So they've changed a lot of things. And, we know I did a story this year talking to Zach Scott, who was the former GM who had the DWI and all that. But when he got there in 2021 under Steve Cohen, he said they were so far behind in terms of analytics. They had to really upgrade everything. But he said Jeremy Hefner, he recognized it right away. He was the perfect guy there as a pitching coach he can speak the analytical language with all the analysts, and he identifies and relates well to the pitchers. So he's kind of the perfect go-between, and he a lot of people credit him. Al Leiter talked to him for the same story. They because he was part of the hiring process under Brody Van Wagenen with to hire Hefner as the pitch coach. He said he's so instrumental in their success. So I think their pitching is in good hands. You're starting to see more homegrown guys. I think that's going to continue.
Yeah, what a disaster, Brody Van Wagenen. But I will say clearly. And John, we call a spade around. I'm sorry, but
hey, you're right, man. You're right.
But look, like you said, the better organization.
If Cohen was there then, Zach Wheeler would still be a Met.
Yeah. Oh, John, why are you gonna do that to me? You know who would be a Met if the MLB didn't screw up? Excuse me, screw up the purchase of Steve Cohen, I would almost guarantee you Bryce Harper would be a New York Met.
That's another
He
one.
wanted to be in New York and
Yeah.
MLB, and you know, our favorite former owners who shall remain nameless kind of screwed the pooch a little bit there, for lack of a better term. But you know, I actually do think that he would have been a New York Met. But we could you know, live on that another day. But something that you brought up, the better organizations that have all these prospects identify the one that they really want to keep and the ones that they're saying, okay, they're going to be good but not that good.
Yeah.
How's it working out with P. Crow Armstrong? Did we make did everyone's boy Billy Epler, who everybody wants to throw flowers at because he was able to get rid of Max Scherzer and Verlander and get some prospect holes back, but he's the one that made all these mistakes, and now we're seeing it where
well, wait,
now Armstrong might be in the MVP conversation at 22, 23 years old, and we gave him away for 4 months of Mr. Thumbs Down himself.
And just to be fair, Epler had made his own mistakes, but that was a Zach Scott call, and he's owned that. He said,
"Oh yeah,
he came from the Red Sox the year before. He said the Red Sox weren't that high on him. He said the Mets organization didn't think he would develop this kind of power, but Billy Epler has enough. So let's spare Billy Epler that one. That was more of a Zach Scott.
He's catching strays over here,
but that hurts because that kid, he looks like a star, and he's the you know, center field is the one spot where somebody's got to step forward and take a hold of that position.
Imagine he was out there right now, the lineup, what it would look like. But anyways, we can only dream. We move on, right? I feel very confident in saying this. We have a president of baseball operations that 95% of this league would kill to have.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, he's proven it. He knows how to find value without necessarily overspending. He's done it now 2 years in a row. He's gotten the most out of some of these pitchers that, you know, nobody thought that much of. Griffin Canning. I mean, unless you're inside, you have all the information, you don't know. But this guy's turned out to be, he looks like a bargain. And same thing we saw last year with Manaea and Severino. So it's pretty clear that this is not an accident. He did the same thing in Milwaukee. So Stearns, whether it's him, whether it's the people that he has working for him to identify all these guys, he's got something going here because he seems to specialize in pitching. So it is a good sign for the organization.
Let me ask you this before we get to the next question by our contributor Klub. Do you think there's any reason why David Stearns identifies these players, why he doesn't put like I'm giving you a 1-year contract. It's a prove-it deal, the Severinos, the Manaeas, the Cantings. Why don't they put some type of team option on there where, you know, you gave Severino the $10 million. Maybe you put a $12 million team option. So you would get a boost if he did well and stuff, and you could keep him back. Because I feel like, think about it. Severino was here, got paid, leaves. Manaea, you get him for 1 year, has to get paid big time. Griffin Canning now having a good year, you're going to have to pay him if you want to keep him around, which I don't know if the Mets are going to want to do. Is there any philosophy to that where it's like, we're taking these guys that, let's be honest, Griffin Canning was out of baseball at the end of last year. Nobody claimed him. He cleared waivers.
Yeah.
Why not get a team option on some of these guys where you could just, you know, accept their decline after that? Maybe you have to pay him a little bit more up front. But to me, I'm like, you know, you're going to be paying double if it works out, triple.
Yeah. Ideally, that's what you would want to do. But in most of the cases, these guys, they still have enough interest from other teams where you can't, you know, what's in vogue now is these guys take these 1-year deals with opt-out or 2-year deals with opt-outs or whatever. That's what Montas has right this year. And so it all comes back to the market and what they can get for these pitchers. I mean, I'm sure the Mets tried to do that with some of these guys, but it comes down to somebody else is going to make the same offer, but give them the opt-out or something. So it's supply and demand, and pitching is so expensive that I think they're willing to roll the dice from year to year and get the best they can and figure if it works out like it did with Manaea, they'll go ahead and pay it because Cohen doesn't mind paying for it. But I think that's the way it works for the most part.
Let me ask you this, and we're honest here. That's one thing. And John, there's not over 500 people watching this live. What was your initial thought when you saw the contract that Frankie Montas got on the Mets?
No, listen, I was on Twitter about it. I think I wrote about it. It kind of shocked me, you know. it just seemed like an overpay. And it was such an early, they jumped out and got him early. So, but since then I've been told, Stearns obviously still had connections in Milwaukee, and Montas pitched better in Milwaukee late in the year than he did, where was he, in Cincinnati, I think earlier in the last year.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he heard from people in Milwaukee that he trusted. Hey, this guy's worth a shot. He's got upside. He's back to doing this, that, whatever. I know they changed his arm angle out there in Milwaukee a little bit. I think they lowered his arm angle, and he was having some success late in the year. So I think that's what it was based on. But I still thought, I was out there arguing for Walker Buehler, who's, he's had some injury issues. And Matthew Boyd, I thought, was a steal. They got him for, I think the Tigers, right? Yeah, got him for, I think, a 1-year deal for less than Montas. There was a few guys. So I did.
What was it, $12.5 million, I think?
Yeah, I did question that for sure. But listen, you also have to give Stearns the benefit of the doubt just because of what
right.
And we haven't seen Montas yet. So that remains to be seen.
You know what it is with him? I'm not upset about the pitcher and the upside. The guy, John, we go through his laundry list of injuries.
Yeah,
he is hurt every single season. And to give him pretty much 2 years guaranteed, he could either leave or stay, for a guy who never pitches 30 starts ever. $17.5 million. It's not like you're paying him as a fifth starter, but it is what it is with that. And that's what leads me to Kloob's question. And we'll let you go shortly, probably another couple minutes. Kloob says, what's the plan for the rotation when Minaya and Montas return?
It's a good question because, it may just be that that'll help them fill out the 6-man rotation because they seem determined to stay in this mostly because of Senga, I think. But somebody's going to have to go. And, McGill is really an interesting case. I tweeting about him again today as well. So I had the same conversation with a scout about him. He's such a tease because when he's really good, scouts just love his stuff. They love the way he can dominate hitters. And he was great last night against the Red Sox, 10 Ks in 4 2/3 innings. And as I mentioned earlier, I thought he deserved to stay in, but it was the right call as it turned out.
Tied his career high.
But he's not consistent. We're seeing it again. And he seems to be, he's still at a point where when things go a little wrong, he had that 5th inning where the ball fell in front of the catcher, and then the ball that Lindor couldn't make the play. When things like that happen, he seems to lose either confidence or focus and doesn't hit his spots quite the same. So there's still a lot to be determined there. I think he's got a high ceiling. Scouts think he has a high ceiling. But how can you can't take Canning out right now. He's been great. And Peterson's, lock it. They're going to have to make some tough calls when these guys are ready to come back. I mean, Minaya is obviously a guy that carried them down the stretch last year. So there's still, they got a lot of good depth. They found out a lot about guys that I didn't have a lot of hope for Canning, but obviously I was wrong about that as well. So they're in a good spot, but they are going to have to make some tough decisions.
Could you see McGill going to the pen? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dan.
No, maybe Blackburn's spot.
Blackburn's another guy. Yeah, he's pitched well in AAA, right?
He dominated today.
Yeah.
So that makes it even tougher.
But yeah, McGill is an interesting possibility as a reliever. I remember talking about that. They tried him a couple years ago, and apparently he didn't. From what I've heard, he didn't like it. His brother, it worked out for his brother. Right?
Throwing 101 miles an hour.
He's got the repertoire to do it. He's got the high fastball, and now he's developed this sinker and this changeup. He could definitely be an effective guy. So maybe that's an option too as well. But some of these guys are going to have to do that with.
So we'll finish off with this last question from Buzz coming back because I was interested in this too. Where does Ryan Clipper fit in moving forward in this situation with the Mets?
He's a really interesting guy. I remember when they made the trade for him. He was which one? The Verlander trade, right? He came from
correct.
Yeah, and I remember talking to scouts at the time who said they were shocked that the Astros gave him up because he's a big. He was a young guy then. He's still young. Big power, left-handed power, but also really good plate discipline. And he does strike out a fair amount. I haven't looked at it lately, but
he's like 30-something%. Last I checked, or over.
But he also takes his walks, got good plate discipline. So he's an interesting, you know, who knows? I mean, who knows where this Alonso thing is going, if they're going to lock him up or not. If they don't lock him up, I could see where he could be in play to be the next guy, the next first baseman, because left-handed power, he could slot right in there. But he's still got a lot to prove as well. But he is an interesting power bat, and they don't have a lot of power bats in their system.
Right now in Double-A, Ryan Clifford's OPS is actually 802. He's got a lot of strikeouts, like you said, 131 at bats, 50 strikeouts.
That's a lot of strikeouts.
That is a lot.
But he's still young. He's much younger than league average there, isn't he? I think
he's 21. This is his age 21 year. Yep.
Yeah. So he's got some growth there to go.
John, I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. Hopefully you come back one day. Hopefully we weren't too hard on you. But
listen to you with Beningo every Saturday.
That's always fun. We talk about everything. Hey, I had fun, guys. Enjoyed it. Yeah, I figured out the StreamYard, so now I'm good to go whenever you want to do it again.
I appreciate that, John. Guys, everybody, thanks so much for joining in. Hopefully we kicked the heck out of the Los Angeles Dodgers this weekend. Nobody saw us beating Garrett Crochet. Everyone thought it was a lock to have a sweep. We all know Juan Soto just needs that one signature moment, and I predict, John, it happens this weekend. Thanks so much for tuning in, everybody, and as always, let's go
Mets.
Take care.